children. He was outraged by it, as we all should be. I really like David Simpson. He's a Christian libertarian. He's somebody who can speak to a very important group of people, and that is the Christians who reflexively support prohibition. Prohibition was supported, alcohol prohibition was foisted upon us by a lot of well-meaning people who didn't understand that government is force. George Washington, the founders of this country, understood that. They lectured us about that. They said it's not persuasion, it's not compassion, it's force. It's like a fire. You have to keep control of it. It is a fearful servant and a dreadful master. But we've lost that lesson. We use the government as a hammer because it's only one tool. Government is force, and if you've got only one tool, force, you see everything as if it's a hammer, you see everything as a nail. And so we go around hammering everybody, trying to change people using force. And unfortunately, in the war on drugs, Christians are perhaps the worst about this. I'm ashamed to say this as a Christian. And so I wanted to get David Simpson on because he talks to Christians. And if you're not a Christian, if you're an atheist, listen to him because if you're a libertarian, you need to understand how to talk to Christians, how to explain to them that they shouldn't use this hammer to nail people on this. This is a medical issue. It's a psychological issue. It's a spiritual issue. If you're a Christian, you should understand this. David Simpson has introduced a bill that would essentially remove marijuana from all the Texas criminal code. Very different from what's been done in states where they've legalized recreational use, in Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and in the District of Columbia. In those areas, they want to still regulate and tax it very heavily. No, David Simpson says it is something that God did not make a mistake when he made it. God made marijuana. Think about that. And it has some real beneficial uses. There's a story up on Infowars.com today. Father faces 20 years in prison for treating daughter's cancer with cannabis oil. And when I heard David Simpson talk about this, that's what he was talking about. He was talking about medical marijuana. He was talking about two children in particular in his constituency, both of them suffering from severe medical conditions, and they could get no relief whatsoever from conventional medical pharmaceutical treatments. The only thing that helped them was cannabis oil. One family had the money that they could go to Colorado and do it legally. The only thing that stopped their child's convulsions over a period of time was cannabis oil. But of course, the cannabis oil has THC in it. And so it's not legal. It's actually a Schedule I drug under our drug laws, which says that it has no medical value whatsoever. That's clearly a lie. And I want to talk to conservatives and the Christians and get them to understand that this is something that began at the United Nations 10 years before Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971. In 1961, the United Nations set up a framework, an agenda, just like Agenda 21, just like they're setting up the UN Arms Trade Treaty. They always set these things up in the UN. Governments sign up as a treaty and say, we'll enact this into law. 10 years later, our government set up a narcotics law with the same drug scheduling that the UN had proposed in 1961. We set that up in 1971. And of course, it's been the UN that has come back and said, we have to, lecturing the American government saying, you got to shut this down in Colorado and Washington. You can't have them allowing people to have marijuana. Lock these people up. And of course, we have more people in prison in America than any other country per capita. Far more than Mao's China or Stalin's Russia per capita. It's an outrage what we have done in this country, and it's time we stop it. It's time we understand that just like alcohol prohibition, it corrupts our government, and it destroys private property. We've seen under Ronald Reagan, they moved the emphasis to the individual rather than to the Al Capones. And in doing so, creating mandatory minimums, creating civil asset forfeiture, what they did was they have destroyed our rights, our property rights, if you will. Why don't conservative Republicans care about that? Well, some do. And David Simpson does. We're going to talk to him in the next hour. And to give you a sample of what he says, I want to play this clip, this short clip of him talking about this bill that he introduced last week.
You know, the present war on drug policies have completely failed. And so, you know, God made marijuana. He didn't make a mistake when he made it. And I think it, like all things he made, should never be abused, and people should be responsible for their actions. But we shouldn't ban a plant that God made. We should use hemp for rope and for fiber and paper. We should use the marijuana with the THC in it to help people with epilepsy. I've got people in the district that I serve that have, one of them has a daughter that they've taken to MD Anderson, Mayo's, Cleveland Clinic, taken all the pharmaceutical drugs, and has not been able to help but only harm their daughter, who has 15 to 20 seizures a day. They, in desperation, went to Colorado. She went 2 weeks without any seizures. Now, not everybody has that luxury. They're very wealthy, and they can afford that. There's a 31-year-old that took a vaccine that killed everybody else in the lot, but caused him lots of problems. But his parents have lovingly cared for him. He's 31 years old now, receives food through a tube, but he has seizures all the time. They can't take him to Colorado, and they would be a felon if they brought the CBD oil back here. But I don't believe we need a big government solution to this problem. We don't need registries or more bureaucracy. We just need to hold people accountable for their actions.
Absolutely, and that's Representative David Simpson of Lubbock, Texas. He's going to be joining us in the next hour. We're going to be talking to him live. I couldn't agree with him more. He has a wonderful way to tackle this. As I point out, we have an article up on Infowars.com today. Father faces 20 years in prison, 20 years in prison, because he treated his daughter's cancer with cannabis oil. And we have a lot of cases where cancer has been treated effectively with cannabis oil. I have one in my folder here that I'm going to talk to David about a man, an elderly man who went through the standard chemotherapy. It looked like it was in remission, but before 5 years was up, it came back with a vengeance. Nothing helped him. They put him in hospice to die. He started taking cannabis oil, and he walked out of the hospice place. Now, that doesn't happen with everybody, but there's clearly a medical value to this. There's a medical value to it in terms of controlling seizures. There's medical value in terms of controlling, if people want to go through the standard chemotherapy, controlling the uncontrollable nausea that you go through with that if you're being treated, if you have cancer or if you have AIDS. It's absolutely criminal to take that away from people. And Rand Paul was right when he called Jeb Bush out on it. Jeb Bush, in his young, preppy days, admitted to smoking it recreationally. But Jeb Bush, as governor, as a former governor, came out last year to try to shut down the medical use of marijuana, to criminalize it, to do things like sending a father to jail for 20 years because he treats his daughter who has cancer, who's dying of cancer, with cannabis oil. Jeb Bush wants fathers like that in prison. I don't know where this is coming out of. I don't know what state this is in. I don't see it on the article. But that's what Jeb Bush wants in Florida. And, of course, 58% of the people in Florida said, no, we're not going to do that. But they needed 60% to change the law. So it is still illegal there. But Rand Paul made the case, and he was absolutely right when he said, how dare you, Jeb Bush, say that you're going to lock somebody up for using something medicinally when you used it recreationally. Of course, there's a different standard for the Jeb Bushes. There's a different standard for the Hillary Clintons of this world, isn't there? They just walk. It doesn't matter what laws they break. They can violate all of these laws, just like HSBC. They can violate the money laundering laws. They can launder money for billions of dollars worth, tens of billions of dollars worth for drug cartels and terrorists, and yet nothing happens to them but a fine. That's a very small percentage of their profits. There's one standard for the big guys, another standard for everybody else. And, of course, in Florida, Jeb Bush's daughter was hooked on prescription drugs. The reporter who reported that, the fact that she got off with nothing happening to her, just coincidentally, after the Bush family gave, I think it was $500,000 to the charity that was supported and worked with by the judge that was presiding over her case. After a reporter pointed that out, the reporter got attacked, because that's what happens in modern America. If you attack the powerful, if you point out the laws that they break, they come after you. They come after the whistleblower. They come after the journalist. They never put the criminals who are breaking the laws in jail. There's an article up on WorldNet Daily. In came out a couple of days ago. The Fed's plans to force vaccines on adults. Not only are they going to prohibit us making decisions to use things that are safe and effective, like cannabis oil, they're going to force us to buy the pharmaceutical companies' products. And let me say this to all the people out there, all the liberal Democrats who are clamoring, and there's 29 bills, there's bills in 29 different states to take away your informed consent. They get around it partially by calling it your personal belief exemption. So you're not informed, you have a personal belief. If you disagree with them, you're not informed. You have faith in something that's not scientific. No, there's a lot of evidence about vaccine harm. And of course, to say that they're going to give you an exemption says that everything is mandated unless they give you an exemption. No, you need our consent, and we need the information, but they don't want to give it to you. They're not just coming after the kids and say we're going to vaccinate them in the schools if they go to school. They're going to come after the adults. And so this is an article by an MD